In this lesson, we're going to use splines to build our fuselage. Alright, so to begin, we're going to learn how to model using splines. Now, splines are 2D shapes that we can manipulate in 3D space. So let's go ahead and learn how to create a spline. Let's go to our Create panel, or Create tab, in the Command panel, and we're going to go to Shapes. Now, we've seen this in geometry, where we can create boxes and things like that, but now we're going to be working with 2D objects, so we need to be in shapes. We're going to be using splines, so we're going to be using the different types of splines that are available to us, and we're going to use line. And line is going to allow us to draw out a custom shape. So let's go ahead and get started by drawing out just the front part of the fuselage here. So I'm going to start right here on this corner, right where the canopy meets the fuselage, and I'm going to left click one time, and that creates a vertex. Now, to create a shape out of this, we need to create a series of vertices that will connect to create a shape. So we're just going to outline this fuselage. So I'm going to hold Shift, and you'll notice that that's constraining that line to a horizontal position or vertical position. It creates a straight line. So I'm going to go across to this point on the canopy, and I'm going to left click one time, and that will drop that vertex right there. Let's go ahead and left click at this point, and then up to here. We'll go up to this highest point right here, and then we're going to hold Shift and drag straight down. Let's left click there, and I'm going to hold Shift again and come out to this point. I'm going to left click there, release Shift, we'll come up to here, left click, then we'll hold Shift, come up to this point in the nose, we'll left click, and then we're going to left click on the first vertex that we created. That's going to bring up a dialog box that says Close Spline, and you want to hit Yes, because that's going to create one continuous shape for us. So now this spline has been closed, and now we have the ability to apply modifiers to it freely and create 3D geometry from this 2D shape. So let's go ahead and right click, because you'll notice that line is still activated. And if I start clicking in my scene, I'm going to be creating new vertices. So right click to end that line creation process. Alright, now I want to modify this spline here. So to modify something, we need to go to the Modify panel. Now inside of the Modify panel, you'll see that we have a selection rollout. And in this rollout, we have vertices, segments, and splines. So I can select each individual element of this spline. If I want to select the entire spline, it will select that whole thing. If I just want to select an edge of that spline, I can do so. And then if I want to select a vertex, I can do so as well. Now, whenever selecting vertices of splines, you always want to use a marquee selection, because you are going to have multiple vertices on top of one another whenever you're building this way. And you can see that by selecting some of these splines as we go along, and it may say something like 2 vertices selected. Okay? Now, because we have one continuous line, we don't really have to worry about that. But now we're going to begin modifying this line, and we'll start to see more of that, and that'll become more important. Alright, now what we've just created here is going to be the center line, and I just went to our perspective view by hitting P on the keyboard. And what we've created is the center line of our ship. So hit T to go to your top view, and you'll see here. So we're going to be building just this side of the ship for right now. Alright? So hit P to go back to your perspective view. And what I want to do is I want to create a copy of this line, so that way I can start getting the outside edge of this ship. So let's grab our Move tool, and you can hit W on the keyboard to access the keyboard shortcut for the Move tool there. And then I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to drag this out in the Y and create a clone of this line. Now, whenever your clone options come up, we want to make sure that we are making an exact copy of this line. Okay, we're going to do just one copy, and then we'll hit OK. Now this line is going to allow me to create the outside shape of my ship, and this is going to create the thickness between the two lines on the top of the ship. Alright, so let's see how we can do this exactly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the unselected. Okay, but you'll notice that it hides my reference images. So what I can do is I can right click and unhide by name, and I'm going to select my profile ref and my top ref. Let's unhide those, and that'll bring those back. Alright, so now let's go to our front view. Now working with this line 002, let's go ahead and start to create some geometry out of it. Let's go to vertex mode, and you'll see that we have all these different vertices that we have access to, but it's not creating a shape. So to create a shape out of this, we need to start connecting these vertices together so we can get that. Alright, so how do we connect vertices? And how do we create topology? Now that's a term that you're going to hear quite a bit. So we're going to go ahead and get a little bit of an introduction to topology. Topology is the overall construction of a 3D model, and it can be best described as the wireframe of the 3D model. Topology is something that you want to take care of. You want it to be nice and neat, very crisp. You don't want any vertices crossing one another and creating dark shadows and things like that. But that's something that we can learn as we go on. So to get started here, let's go ahead and use our Refine tool, and you can scroll down in your rollout here, and you'll see Refine. Now before we click on Refine, let's check Connect and Linear. These options are going to help you to create new geometry or new lines on this spline, and it's going to create them in a linear fashion, so without any curves. And I find that much easier to create geometry this way than without the linear checked, because then sometimes we can get some lines that are very, very curved, and it's hard to get them straightened out. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit Refine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this vertex right here, and you'll see that we have this Refine icon. We'll left click on that, and then we're going to go straight across to this line here, and we'll left click, and you'll see that creates a vertex. Now we're going to right click to end that, and you'll see that it connects a line in between the two. This is an edge, and this is adding to our topology. Now if you want to modify the topology, you can see that this line is kind of diagonal here, so we can marquee select around that vertex. And again, if you scroll up here, you can see that that says 2 vertices selected. So that's important that you use marquee selection. And what we want to do is we want to drag that up a little bit just to kind of straighten that line out. Alright, now let's continue on here. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and refine again, and we're going to go from this vertex down to here, and then straight down to this vertex. We'll right click, and that is now created. Let's go ahead and right click this time, and it's going to bring up our quad menu. Now this quad menu allows us to have quick access to some of the common tools depending on the object that you have selected. So I have a spline selected, and you can see that I have Tools 1 and Tools 2 section. These tools will pertain to splines. So what I want to use is that Refine Connect, because that's what we've been using. And sometimes it can be a little tough to keep going back and forth and clicking Refine. So what we want to do is we want to access that very quickly by using the quad menu. And again, you can access that by right clicking. Let's click on Refine Connect. Let's go from this vertex. We're going to click on this one and then go straight across to the end. We'll right click to end that, and you can come in and you can refine your topology if you need to. And again, use that marquee selection to make sure that you are getting all the vertices. You don't want to move these vertices separate of one another. I'm going to right click, connect. Let's go from here down to here, and then just straight down. We'll right click. That looks pretty good. And then finally we're going to go from here all the way down. So refine, connect, and we're going to go to here and then straight down. Right click. There we go. So now we've created the spline that is made up of quads. Now quads are basically faces that are made up of 4 sides. So you can see that this face is created of 4 edges. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. You could also count the vertices, and that will help as well. Now this one is made up of 3, and this is called a triangle. Triangles will work with this. Okay, so triangles are okay. Now the reason that we need quads and triangles is because we're going to be using a modifier called surface that is going to add 3D geometry to this, and it will only work on surfaces that are quads or triangles. We cannot have polygons that are 5 or more. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a shape out of this. Let's go to our perspective view by hitting P on the keyboard, and you'll see that we still have this very flat shape. So what we need to do is we need to move some of these points out so that way they will match our reference image. So what we're going to do is we're going to select these vertices right across the middle here, and we're going to go to our top view. I'm going to pull these out, and I'm going to try to get these to match my reference image as close as possible. So I'm going to grab these, and I'm going to pull this out and just push these in until they match my reference image. And there we go. Now some of these might have a little bit of difficulty reaching one another, but we'll do the best that we can. Okay. Now it looks like some of these are getting a little out of sorts here, so what we're going to do is we're going to select those, and we'll just pull those over to where it looks a little more comfortable. Okay, we'll deal with those in just a moment. So now we've created this shape. So what do we do now? Well, what we need to do now is we need to turn off vertex mode. We can do this a couple of different ways. We can click on vertex mode here, or we can simply click on line, and that will turn that off, or we could expand line and click on vertex mode here, and that will turn that off as well. Alright, so let's right click and unhide all. Now here you'll see that we have our first line that we created, and then here we have our outside edge, okay, that we've just created. Now what I want to do at this point is I want to apply a modifier that's going to create 3D geometry. So let's use the surface modifier to do that. So I'm going to go to my modifier list. I'm going to scroll down until I see surface. And there it is. And you'll see that this applies 3D geometry to our line, or our spline that we created. Now, let's go ahead and do a quick render just to make sure that our normals are correct. Now you'll see that we can see through that spline, but I know that it's built. So what's happening? Well, the normals are flipped in the wrong direction. So what I need to do is I need to go to my surface modifier, flip normals, and then re-render that, and you'll see that those are now facing the correct way. Alright, so now that we have created the first part of the fuselage, what we're going to do in our next lesson is we're going to learn how to refine this shape by connecting it to another line, and then we will build out the rest of the fuselage in our next lesson. Alright, so I'll see you then.